safely roll.
Cool. Dude, that's the whole thing. Is I tell people, especially with guys like us, that if we end up getting, we'll do a part two because there's so much I want to get into, and this is, and I tell people the way these formats or these shows is going to be more for guys like us. I mean, I want to get into the in depths of speaker placement alive. I've just gotten
Yeah.
into playing stereo on stage, running an amp over here and a cabinet over here and cabinet over here, and trying to
Yeah.
feel the stage. And another thing I'd like to get into tonight is how it's so much technology has changed. Anymore the days of the dual stacks is out the window. You just run a single 12 and you mic it and let the engineers run it and stuff.
Right.
There's
Right.
so
Right.
much that,
Oh,
but
dude, it's endless. We
yes,
can
yes.
talk all day
Day
long.
long. And I tell people all the time. Now, Crystal understands completely with me having the studio and playing, but I have three rigs. I have a small gig rig, a medium, and a large,
Yeah.
depending on the sound system, because you don't want to carry that my 212 and 15 cabinet into a little bar and overdrive everybody. So I carry just the 212 cabinet,
Yeah.
and there's so much nuances of that. And I found out the other day before we get started, Clockwork Angels from Rush.
Hmm.
I can't even think of his name. The lead guitarist,
Alex Lifeson.
Alex Lyson. Sorry, they recorded that whole album on a Roland Cube, 15 watt.
Did they really? I didn't know
Little
that.
bitty. I was going through a lot of the notes and stuff because somebody
Yeah.
mentioned it to me, and I was fact checking them, and I was like, and literally through, because it had a certain tone and it was cutting through everything else, and it was
Yeah.
so hilarious because I've got one in here, and I was like, that's not that good of an amp. I plumbed it in and started playing it, and I'm like, holy crap, this thing's got some. It's just so little things like that
Yeah.
me getting into the engineering, I've
That's really what it. Yeah.
where it comes in.
It's how you engineer it and produce it.
Yeah, yeah. I've had a couple of musicians come in that we need to be recording, but I have a
Yeah.
couple
Yeah.
of
Go ahead and
musicians
we'll
with
take.
a certain. Yeah, we'll get started with a certain sound, and you got to get creative. I literally stuck a microphone. I cut the hole out of a metal bucket, put it up against a speaker, and stuck a microphone at the other end to get it right. Because we tried the reverb room, we tried digital reverb, and it just didn't have the sound that he wanted. And I
Right.
stuck a 5 gallon paint can with a microphone, a Shure SM57
Yeah.
in the other end of it, and shot it through it, and that's what he wanted. It was weird, but yeah. So let's get this thing going. So
Okay.
countdown. Howdy, 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 folks. This is gonna be real informal tonight. We're not gonna do no formalities. I am excited. I've been trying to track this fella down. I've been for 3 years trying to get this guy on a show. And it took me changing format, building a whole new line of shows. We've sat and talked about this stuff for a long time, but as y'all know, this is all about music. Folks, I want to introduce a very good friend of mine and been an inspiration of mine for the past couple of years, Mr. Dave Hurley from Salem, Massachusetts. Well, not originally. Are you in Salem now, or are y'all back in Ohio?
No, we actually moved to Ohio, so that's where
Ohio.
we
So
are
you're in
now. Yeah.
Ohio. I know there for a long time you was running back and forth.
Yes. Yeah.
So y'all are in Ohio. I'm not going to give a big long intro. Dave has had so much, so we're just going to cover it as we go. But Dave has been a musician for a very long time. We'll get into that here shortly. Played with multiple bands. Is a professional touring musician now, guitarist and vocalist. One of the best lyric artists I've seen. We will post some of his music in the show and send you links to all his stuff. He has helped me put stuff together, and just like I said, all around great musician. And one of these guys that I love how I say this, and a lot of people it aggravates, but got lost in the sift. And I don't want anybody to think that that's derogatory, but it's not, because everybody knows that with these shows we're talking to people that hasn't won that lottery, that's gotten so close, and Dave is on his way. This is what this show's going to be partaking for. But I'll hush. Dave, how you doing, man? Let's just get right into you, man.
Well, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Always happy to talk about music. It's our passion, as you know.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you're too kind, but I appreciate you, man. Thank you for Thank you for having me on.
Well, every bit of it has been. I mean, how many times have I sent you messages about music and about a song or
Yeah.
amplifier, and you've been with me getting back into this. I mean, you've been there literally since before I moved over here. When I had my studio over there, we'd spend hours talking about it when I first picked up the guitar again after 18 years, and you've been there, kind of the whole time. And folks, as y'all know, when y'all catch the first show we're fixing to release, y'all know y'all see me get very emotional about this because music is my life now. But Dave, I know normally I would give an introduction, but man, I want to get straight into you. Let's start in the early timeline. Now you've been playing guitar since you was a teenager, if I remember right.
Yeah, I actually before I started when I was 10.
10, yeah,
So it's been a long time now.
and you
So yeah, so I guess 36 years I've been
wow.
playing.
Now professionally, you've been playing how long?
I've been playing out pro really since I was 16. So
Wow.
and I started playing my first real band was when I was 17, and so I've been playing in bars since I was 17. In fact, that I was playing with some older guys, and the singer was a real good friend of mine. He was older, but he had to get power of attorney like over me so that some of the bars would
That
let
you
me
could
in to
get
play.
into the bar, yeah.
And of course, the agreement is, of course, I wouldn't drink, which was fine with me because I just wanted to play
Play,
tunes and stuff.
yeah.
And yeah, that's it.
So you've literally been a touring musician now, pretty much full time the whole time, or off and on.
Yeah. I've never really not played in a band. I mean, of course, you take your little breaks and
Yeah,
stuff when one project ends and before you start something else. But I've also, if I wasn't playing in a band, I was also doing like original stuff and
yeah,
always recording and always,
absolutely.
and that was around the time period when, you would graduate from like a 4 track
Yeah,
analog machine to like an
yeah,
8 track to
yeah.
like I recorded my first sort of what you would call it major project with actually the singer of that band I just mentioned. Um, he was a guitar player too, fabulous musician, one of the best musicians I've ever worked with. But we recorded on a Tascam, like I think it was the DM, I think it was Tascam, Fostex,
Fostex, yeah,
DMT8. It was their 8 track
yeah.
digital
The inch and a half
machine.
reel, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it was just we wanted to do something simple. It was an acoustic project, and we recorded 10 songs, and it was it was fun to do. And there was, of course, back then there was no really Pro Tools. There was
Yeah.
no like no auto tune, nothing,
Nope.
nothing like that.
Nope.
So it was all just
You
a
started
couple
all
acoustic
over and did it
guitars.
again.
Yeah, and vocals, and that's what we wanted, and it actually came out sounding pretty good. And then from there, it's like then the computer stuff started kicking in, and I was a little skeptical about that at first because who wants to get started in a project and then have your drivers not communicate and
Yeah, yeah,
you can't get going. But then after I started with like Pro Tools 6, and then after that, and computers started getting more powerful and faster and all that stuff, then it becomes like, of course, a standard thing. Now I
yeah.
wouldn't dream of not recording on a computer, but
It's funny you say that because me working in the studio like I do. I actually most of my professional career has been in the live music as an engineer, and a lot of the digital. They grab onto it real fast. But a lot of your studios, the studio that I work for, they've still got an inch and a half reel machine,
yeah,
and they'll record on it. And I'm a little bit younger than you, but I remember the early days. I recorded my first song on an old 4 track. I can't remember what it was. I think it was a Radio Shack brand. But
yeah,
seeing this innovation of technology, and we'll get into that in a little bit, has really changed the whole scope of music. Just something I did the other day. You literally have to mix differently for vinyl than you do for the new digital format and tape because vinyl just won't push the lows as good as digital and tape, and we'll get into that. So you said so would it be honest to say you've been playing professionally and touring professionally for 25 years or
yeah,
closer to 30?
yeah, yeah.
That's what I was thinking. And most of it's been on the eastern seaboard, or have you went overseas or?
Yeah, no, nothing like that. I'm not that big or accomplished or anything. I'm just a local cat, but I played in other states, sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, and traveled around a little bit.
Well,
But
yeah. Even when I was talking to you a couple of years ago, you was playing in Ohio, then going to Pennsylvania and playing, and
yeah, Indiana,
yeah,
you know, but just around the surrounding, the sort of tri-state or whatever. And just like making. I've always had a day job, but that's always been my second job.
yeah.
Because as we talked about before, it sounds like fun, but it's a lot of work.
It
I
is.
mean, it's fun, but it's also a lot of work you have to put in to get a band rolling and you know get everything happening the way it needs to be. Um, and yeah, just cruising around trying to make some extra money, obviously with cover tunes and stuff like that. If you got some original tunes you want to put out there, you sort of you
Feed
insert
them
them in the covers,
in. Yep.
and yeah, and if your original tunes are palatable enough, they don't even know they're
Absolutely.
not covers, so it's a way for people to hear them, and then
That's kind of one of the
that,
oldest names in the book. You put in one
yeah,
of you do all your covers, and you put one of yours in there. Like, wow, that was cool. Who wrote who did
right,
that? And it's like us, huh?
right,
And
right,
that's kind of, to me, that was part of the reason I liked it. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what style? What I know you've probably played multiple genres and style, but what do you seem to fall back on? You're
Definitely rock and pop and stuff like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
the
that's
stuff that
my
I've listened to is a lot of yours is a lot of that 80s and 90s, kind of a not real hard rock, but
yeah.
a good rock style. And folks, we are going to clip in as we go and we talk about some of his songs. We're going to clip in his music and all that here, but
Scattering leaves, the days go, dragging us along like ragdolls. Make these moments move faster. It's our latest disaster. There's no place I'd rather be anyway. This will do for a while. Gather your thoughts so we can run away from it all and ease our minds. We'll try to make it all matter, pave the way for the shattering of youth. Promise I realize not far behind. Leave nothing to chance and we will not find. Still I'd like to be here for a while. Try to make it all matter. Pave the way for the shattering of youth. Promise I realize not far behind. Leave nothing to chance and we will not find. Still I'd like to be here for a while. Still I'd like to be here for a while. Scattering leaves, the days go, dragging us along.
so I gotta ask every guitarist and vocalist, who's your biggest influence?
I grew up. It's funny, man. Probably according to my mom, and I remember this when I was a kid, a little kid, and heard Queen, Another One Bites the Dust. I was just super
Great.
hyper focused on that
Yeah.
on that bass groove and stuff, and I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. My dad was a big country listener, and I appreciated it, and I appreciate it even more now, especially the old classic
Oh
country
yeah,
guys who could all play, who could all sing,
yeah,
and they were just amazing. But it didn't grab my sort of my heartstrings. It didn't have the drama like rock and roll
yeah,
did for me. You know what I mean? So from there, I started when I heard In Excess, What You Need, and that breakdown in there with the little guitar part
yeah,
breakdown. I just thought that was the coolest sound in the world. It sounded like a chainsaw to me going through styrofoam or whatever, and I was like, man, I got to make that sound somehow. And funnily enough, later on in life, I ended up playing with Andrew Ferris from In Excess, but
wow,
uh, and that was cool, a cool experience. But and then I heard Van Halen,
oh
and
yeah, one of the
it was all
greatest.
over.
It was
And
all over.
yeah,
That's kind with me, it was being raised up where I am in the southeast, coming from a Christian background. I was raised by my grandparents, so I wasn't even allowed to listen to rock and roll until I got older. I was
right,
raised
right,
up on gospel and the old
which is
country,
great. Yep,
uh, a lot of Buddy Holly and stuff like that. But
also great.
when like you said with you with Van Halen, of course Van Halen was one of them for me, but for me it was Pantera, Dimebag, because everybody knows I'm a metalhead, Dimebag
Also
Darrell.
great. Right. Yeah,
But
Dimebag was amazing. Yeah.
yeah, that's what got me started. I was playing country
Mhm.
music and stuff, playing a lot of at that time Waylon and Johnny Cash and all that. But when I heard that, I was like, okay, I've got to get rid of this. So I own one Telecaster and I can't hardly play it anymore because I just don't even like the sound. But I've got my Stratocasters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you mentioned in Queen, Queen was probably the band, Brian May, that really started me. The song Princes of the Universe. Everybody talks about We Will Rock You and all that, and it was great. But for me,
Right.
it was Princess of the Universe when he opens up with that A flat crunch, and it just
Right.
and then hearing Freddie Mercury singing, I just
It's just
lost it. That changed my life, and kind of same with you. It
mhm.
developed us into I call it just developed it into the love of the music.
That's it. I
So
mean, it changes you forever. It does.
it does. It does. So who are you playing with now? I know you've got your own solo projects, but you're also playing with I think two bands, or is it just one now?
Yeah, actually two projects. I guess three if you count my original stuff that I do,
Yeah.
which is a great sort of sideline because when you're playing covers all the time, that's great. But
Yeah.
you got your own stuff that you want to do too.
Absolutely.
But so when I play out full band, it's with a band called Summer Highway, and the one of the singers we got two main lead singers in the band, and a male and a female. The guy was actually backup singer for Dolly Parton for a while,
Oh wow.
and then we got another female singer, Liz. She's great. She can cover a lot of stuff. So between the two of them, we can cover a lot of ground.
Oh yeah.
Band's really good. So that's fun and fulfilling. And then I have an acoustic. I do a three-piece acoustic project with some members of another band I used to play with. So we still have that going on, and that's really cool because it's obviously more stripped down,
Yeah.
and you can really
More personal.
really hyper focus on vocals and stuff like that, which always gets my
Oh yeah.
heart going.
Well, yeah. With you being a vocalist and a guitarist too, where with me, I've got a few vocal projects and a lot of guys say that I'm good, but I can't stand myself. I can't stand the sound of it. And I think I sent one of them to you, but
No,
with
you sound great. You sound great.
no, I don't. but with you saying that, talking about the acoustic, that's a whole nother dynamic. See, we have to be careful. We got to kind of stay focused. Then I've taken notes and we diverge back. But
Yeah.
it's so, to me, there's such a big difference in between playing that heavy gain, light string, electric guitar, and then
Yeah.
going to an acoustic. And I had to laugh. My buddy that was helping us get set up here, he had my acoustic out. He's a great pianist and plays a little bit of guitar. He goes, "Good Lord, dude, the strings on your acoustic are crazy." And I was like, "Yeah, I play heavies." And he goes,
Yeah.
"Why?" I said, "To keep my hands in shape, but also just the difference in tonal qualities."
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you go from the electric and the over and doing the acoustic project. But I got to ask you one question. I'm gonna let you run back with it. When all else fails, when you're writing, do you grab the electric or do you grab the acoustic?
I prefer grabbing the acoustic these days. I'll grab a lot of the electric just because it if you don't plug it in, it's quiet and it doesn't
Yeah,
bother anybody else. So I do a lot of my, oddly enough, I do a lot of my writing sitting in front of the TV when the
yeah,
show's on,
yeah,
and usually Lynn's watching with me or
yeah.
whatever, and not to bother anybody else, I'll grab the electric. If I do plug it in, it's one of those little Boss Katana
Yeah,
amps
the
that I
little
just about
practice amps.
barely
Yeah,
crack it on or whatever. Um, but acoustic is great to grab for writing.
there's
Just
something about having an acoustic in my hands and then sitting in front of my piano.
yeah,
I can't hardly write. I mean, I might get a riff in my head, on my
hmm
electrics, but when I sit down to structure the song, and I want to get into songwriting with you here in a little bit, but I always grab my acoustic. I don't know what it is. It's just something. Maybe it's the whole Neil Young thing. A lot of people don't like the guy, but I love the guy. I
yeah,
loved his style and his music and what he stood for. Now a little bit different politically, but
sure,
but there's just something about having that acoustic and a piano in front of you. And
yeah.
for some reason, I can't write unless I have that acoustic. And I think it's funny that you talk about writing with your companion next to us, and we'll get into that too. It
Yeah.
takes a special companion to put up with us musicians.
Sure does. Right.
So you're
Yeah. 'Cause
doing. Go ahead.
I was just going to say because they're also changed for life.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They know that they can't change you, and they know that going in. And if you got the right person, they're not going to try to change you and all that stuff. It's a sort of a handshake, of course. You know what I
Oh, of
mean?
course.
But and she has things that she loves and she does too. Obviously, Lynn.
Yeah.
She's got channels of her own, YouTube channels
Yep.
of her own, and all that stuff. So I'm there to help out with that any way that I can. So we're both supportive.
Oh yeah, yeah. Every time I click on her, her channel. Well, ever since I've known y'all, you've been right there beside her. Even before y'all got married, and when you was traveling back and forth, I don't know how many, because me and Lynn used to burn a lot of late nights together on the
hmm
channels, and
hmm
you'd be coming in after doing a gig at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, drove
hmm
from Ohio to Massachusetts to see her, and just wore out, but you're always right there,
Yeah.
and that says something too. Also, with your character as a musician, I see playing as long as I have. I'm kind of in a weird state that I've got it here, but with my neck injury and stuff, I don't have it as here as I used to have. But I see a lot of guitar players and musicians. I can always tell. I've always called it giving up the ghost to the guitar. When the guitar becomes your soul, you see a lot of players that'll get to a certain level of playership, and then they'll stick right there for the rest of their life. And then
hmm
you have these guys that literally will force themselves. Of course, you do have the guys that's naturally talented, like Brian May, and we can name off a million of Jimi Hendrix and
Yeah.
Dimebag Darrell and Lester Flatt, Earl Scruggs, but they just have this natural ability. But I don't, with you, I've heard you're very mechanical, but you're also artistic about it. I'm very mechanical myself, but I'm at that level that I get to hear, and then I see these guys that's up here, but they spend 8 to 12 hours a day doing it, and I'm like, that's where you give up your soul to the guitar. That's where you're at with the love of the guitar.
Yeah.
And I'm just now, after having to give it up for 18 years. Now I would rather sit in here with a guitar in my hand as go in there and eat. There's been a lot of days I've sat with a guitar just working on a song. That's the love of it. And with you watching your channel and listening to your music, some of the stuff that you put together, and once again, folks, we will clip that stuff in. The musicality to it, and knowing the timeline that it takes you to write that song,
Yeah.
you're up here, dude. When you're putting
Man,
some of them songs you put together, and that whole ensemble that you sent me last year, you said you did it in 3 weeks, and I'm like, how?
yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that, man. I think when you've been doing it as long as we have, you feel it's something you'd be doing anyway, even if nobody heard it.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? That doesn't matter to you. You get And it's funny. I was listening to an interview of a guitar player I grew up listening to. I would consider him an influence on me. And when I listen to my stuff,
Well, who is it?
it's Vinnie Moore. Have you
Oh
heard?
yeah, oh yeah,
So Vinnie had chops out the yang, and I grew up listening to Mind's Eye and all that stuff.
yes,
But he was it was a podcast of his. It wasn't even an interview. He was just talking, and somebody had QA thing, and somebody had asked him about songwriting or whatever, and he said two things that happens to me every time. So I was completely identifying with it. He said one, when he gets a song stuck in his head that a song of his that he ends up writing,
yeah,
it rolls around in his head so much that he cannot forget about it. Like it's one of those, like an earworm that he hasn't even recorded yet. You know what I mean? And that's what ends up becoming the song for him. And then the other thing he said that I thought had me literally laughing out loud, was he said, he goes, I get my best song ideas in that twilight, like right before you fall asleep. And he goes, in my head it sounds amazing, and then as soon as I wake up, I can never remember it. That's, I used to keep a tape recorder back when tape recorders were a thing, by my bed, so you could hum the melody in there real quick.
Yep.
And then now, of course, it's your phone. Know, but that's good. That's the little things we do that, like. But it's like you just said, it's an entire. I guess what I was trying to say, to get back to it, you got to keep me on point, man, because I can talk about this stuff all night. But it is, when you've been doing music as long as we have, they don't feel like accomplishments to you. It's just what you do.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So it's like somebody else can maybe listen to your songs, and it's awesome if people like it. Obviously that's great. But if they listen to your song and think it's really cool, basically they let you know things about it that you didn't maybe even discover yourself. You know what I mean? Because they're listening to it with different ears than you are.
Absolutely, and different styles, different influences, and that's what the beauty of, I'm doing a lot of stuff solo myself, but that's the beauty of having. I'm lucky that I have a wife that's a musician, and I've got friends, of course, bandmates and stuff. But I love bouncing my ideas, guys like you, bounce my ideas off of them, and it gives it back because it gives you a fresh. How would you put fresh perspective to it? And sometimes it's some of the most subtle stuff. Sometimes I've wrote stuff, my wife looked at me and like, no, but I don't get offended by it,
Right.
But in saying what you talking about Vinny is, there was another one that would literally 12 hours a day with a guitar in his hands, and great, one of the greatest to me. That another one that, he made it big, but he was not iconic, and we'll get into matter of fact, let me write that down. Get into how I call it winning the lottery. Getting big is you got to be in the right place at the right time, or know the right person, or just be totally even the Beatles, when they first came out, nobody liked them. But for some reason, they ended up, they stuck with it, and they got in the right timing, and then they just blew up, Yeah. So many stories we hear of that. But even on the songs, I'm so glad that you're bringing up the writing the songs. Me as an engineer, and being in the position I am at my life and my career, I have no aspirations of making it big, getting up on a stage in front of 100,000 people.
Right.
I want to put the songs out there.
Right.
To somebody else. So I love writing. That, to me, that's where my heart is now. And in the studio, that's we'll get into that later, the whole different thing in between playing live and being a studio musician. To me, there's two different genres. And I've seen a lot of good live musicians, and get them in a studio and they just don't have it.
It's true. Yeah. They feed off all kinds of stuff, the energy that's going on live and all that stuff, and it's a different game. If you're going to play in the studio, it's a little bit different game than playing live, or at least it can be. You know what I mean? So, and then the topic is so vast. There's all kinds of things I want to say, but because the first thing that popped in my head was somebody like Steve Lukather, who's been a studio cat,
Absolutely.
forever today.
One of the best, played on some of the biggest.
yeah, and you know, it's funny because he may not like he. I don't want to alienate anybody by saying this, but like he might not have as identifiable a style as like Eddie Van Halen, for
Nope.
example. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But that's one of the reasons it made him a great studio cat. You know what I mean? Because
absolutely.
unless you're looking for somebody that has the huge fingerprint that EVH would have,
Absolutely.
like on Beat It, when they specifically hired him because they wanted that guitar solo to sound a certain way,
Yeah.
right? So, they and Steve Lukather, of course, played on that. You know, played on Beat It, played
Uh-huh.
everything else except the guitar solo.
Uh-huh.
But the two different styles are apparent in the song, whereas
Absolutely.
like the rhythm part of the song is almost, I hesitate to use the word generic, but of course Steve Lukather's good enough to play it like that on purpose,
Absolutely.
and that's what he was hired to do. In fact, watching an interview with him where he was like the first run through he did and sent it to Quincy Jones was like it had too much of a fingerprint, and
Mm-hmm.
Quincy Jones was like, I got to get this on pop radio. You know, he's like, dial it back just a little bit.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Key point. Keep this in mind. We'll go to that in a minute. The
yeah,
mentality of a studio musician is different than the mentality of a performing stage
yeah,
musician. Go ahead.
right, right. Yeah, and that's just it. That's really it. I mean, like sometimes if you're playing in the studio and you're playing on somebody else's album,
Yeah, absolutely.
you're you're required, you know, to play the part that they want you to
Absolutely.
play.
Absolutely.
And he was one of the guys that kind of um, he was also hired, of course, to sort of write a lot of the parts, which he
Mm-hmm.
did. And it's just interesting to listen to him talk about all that stuff.
Oh yeah, I
But
could forever.
yeah, that's the difference is that like sometimes when you're playing in the studio, you approach everything differently than you would playing it
Absolutely.
live. The reckless abandon, let's say, that you might play with live, you know, you might dial it back a little. So
Yeah.
I think for me, like Angus Young's a really good example where
Absolutely.
the Back in Black album, let's say, is like just a masterpiece, right? And then you hear them do it live, and they sound awesome,
Yeah.
and Angus plays great, but you can tell he's letting it go a little bit more live.
Absolutely.
You
Well,
know what I mean?
like you said, you feed you as as a studio musician. It's not so much that you feed off of a crowd. You feed
Yep.
off of the music, or you
Yep.
feed off of the challenge of
Right.
making that tone sound that way. And
Right.
then that's the reason I don't ever put them in the same. Now there are some groups out there that are just as good in the studio and they're just good on live. Uh,
Toto.
yeah,
You know,
John,
look at
I can't
there's
even say
yeah,
it. DreamWorks Theater or sorry,
your theater.
Dream
Yep.
Theater. John, how do you say it? Petronowski?
Petrucci.
Petrucci, yeah.
Yeah.
But then you got people like Rage Against the Machine. I just watched the interview of the guy that filmed or that recorded their first album, that Rage Against the Machine, that went platinum. You know, and they came in and he separated them out and was trying to get the sound, and it wasn't the same. And he said, "No, let's screw this. Everybody get in the same room. We're going to mic it,
Right.
and you're going to play it live." And it
Right.
just blew up. And that's where, to me, what I love about music is you can come in my studio and want to record hip hop, and I can't do it. I mean, I can. I like a lot of thump. I'm just not into that style. But
Right. Right.
there's so many different outlets for so many different styles and people. But like you was talking about Vinny, guy can go in and play a Michael Jackson studio one day, recording session one day, and then turn around and slide into a Southern Texas blues the next day.
Yeah.
And it sounds, I have to be very careful how I say this. As being that kind of a musician, I take more pride in being able to generic it out and to mold my tone for what you want than
Yep.
somebody that comes out, well, I'm going to play it this way all the time and this is all
Right.
I have.
Right.
That to me is, like I said, it's apples and oranges, but to me, I look up to those guys that can play country one day and then play Metallica the next day, and
Yeah.
and do it on a professional level at the point. And here's the thing too, and I know you've been in the studio and you've worked enough around this. These guys that can play the same, have the persistence. I have so much respect for these artists that struggle with their albums. You know, uh,
Yep.
hours upon hours upon hours. I talked to a guy the other day. He did the same 13 guitar notes 9,600 times.
9,600.
100. It took him 5 days to get that one riff down right.
Wow.
For the simple fact, the engineer, it was on a, I ended up contacting him. It was on a YouTube channel, and I wanted to verify it. And so I just messaged him, and the guy messaged me back. He said the engineer wanted to clip out a part of this one and put it in here. And once again, we'll get into the technology. You couldn't do that 20 years ago. You know,
Right,
you can
yeah.
now. He says, no, I want to get it right. You know, it just, to me, that dedication, and guys like you that write these songs, you know, that can spend, well, it's not a dedication anymore. Now I'm addicted to it. I'll sit right here for 8 hours and on a set of lyrics and just try to, you know, get them toned, you know, get them focused right and everything.
Right.
But these guys, I've just got so much respect for these. Kenny Langston, one of the Nashville, Tennessee, one of the most premier guitarists, played on so many different people. And I watched a rig rundown of an hour of just going through his equipment and the variety of guitars, you know, that he has. And he says, when they call me, I bring them all because I never know what I'm going to get into. And
That's it. Yeah.
that's where it really hits me that sometimes as musicians we can be very, I don't want to, I'll probably offend some people and I don't care, I'm sorry, but can be very self-centered.
Yeah.
It's got to be my way or the highway, and
Yeah.
there's so many others out there. Like you being a writer and a studio musician, yes, you have a certain style that you try to mold yourself to, but I've also seen that your style, you can change it and go, when you're doing your cover stuff, y'all's cover work sounds just as good musically as the guys you're covering, and then you turn around and you do your own stuff that's a whole different style. To me, I'd put you in the category of the studio musicians for the simple fact that you are changing it up and doing
Yeah.
things.
Again, I appreciate that. That's pretty high compliment because, like you said, a studio musician's job is pretty varied. You got to wear a lot of hats, and it's definitely not easy. And one thing my confession is that I consider myself a very lazy guitar player, especially as time goes on and you got YouTube you can get on and you can pull up 100 players a day that can
Yeah.
play better than you, right? You know, and it's always like that, and it's always going to be like that. And that's why I'm not a fan of comparing guitar players and this guy's better and all that,
Yeah.
because it's like they all have their thing. Like, so
Absolutely.
one thing I always say was like, so I love Chet Atkins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love Angus Young.
Yeah.
But do I want to hear Chet Atkins try to play an AC/DC song? No. You know, if Chet were around, that's not what I want to hear from
Absolutely.
Chet. You know what I mean? And vice versa. I mean, Angus is good enough. If it's something he wanted to tackle, he could probably get into the Travis pick and stuff and do it.
The chicken pick.
But when it comes down to it, Angus's wheelhouse is plugging straight into a Marshall, putting it on 10.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean, or whatever.
And
a plexi,
feeding the
and
feedback right.
yeah, and that's a whole different art too, man. I mean,
Absolutely.
like trying to tame that beast and making it sound musical is like
See,
there's a bunch of
there's
players
so
that get enough
many
credit for it.
rabbit holes we can go down. That's a whole
Yeah.
nother discussion.
Yeah.
Ted Nugent with his stinking bird guitars, semi-hollow bodies, and having certain spots on the stage and certain
Yeah.
directions that everybody thinks he's just up there dancing around. I call it riding the feedback dragon, because
That's it.
he's twisting around, and it's so funny how the technology has changed that we're losing some of that now.
Yeah.
Everybody's going with pedals and going with an isolated cabinet running straight into the front board and feeding it through with the engineer. We're losing a lot of that feedback, but that's the reason I like I can't never say his name, John
Petrucci, yeah.
Petrucci. He runs
Yeah.
the 4 single 12 cabinets,
Mm-hmm.
2 behind him and 2 in front of him, so he can play with the feedback. But there's so much we can get on that. But you're right.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Topic's huge.
It's so funny. I do want to get back on the songwriting, because I know that's very you actually write more than I do, and I've always wanted to ask you, kind of change the subject. We'll come back around, but how do you when you structure a song? Do you have a certain format that you go by, or do you just let it flow freely, or how do you? Some people use like a, they say you got to have a hook and three choruses and a good melody. Do you do it that way, or do you just let each song come organically?
Yeah, the organic part. I don't. I never. I never strive for a specific structure. I think just growing up listening to songs the way we have
Yeah,
since the beginning,
subconsciously you do it.
it's drilled into you. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like that formula is never anything I had to look up. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
It's just like I don't even have to time a song. I know that by the time I'm done writing it, it's going to be within that like 3.5, 4 minute range, three
yeah,
and a half, 4.5 minute
yeah.
range. And of course you can write longer epic stuff if you want to, and that stuff's great too. But I grew up on that as well.
Yeah,
But
and I got it to be
it's
done.
by the time you write your verse and write your chorus and maybe a bridge and stuff like that, that's just kind of
It
how it
structures
works
out.
out.
Yeah,
I'm minded like that because I grew up listening to pop music, and I just that's everything's a formula anyway. Even jazz music is kind of a formula because it's like there's certain things you have to do, or at least follow
yeah,
before it sounds like jazz.
absolutely,
You want to, you're not going to hear power chords in jazz. They purposely stay away from the fifth and the chord, and stuff
absolutely.
like that. And there's usually an improv section if it's straight ahead. If it's fusion, you're going to have
Yeah,
um, a ton of those sections. But it's like the point is, there's like even forms of music that try to get away from that standard sort of
still
pop
have an
formula. It's still a
unwritten.
formula.
Yeah,
That's what makes it sound like a certain genre. So um, I tend not to think like that, and I don't. I'm not a huge fan of the labels necessarily, just because of that. I try to write something that sounds good to me,
yeah,
and something I'm not necessarily hearing out there, and it because like I'm sure you do it too when a song comes on. It takes a lot to sort of grab your attention these days. If it does grab your attention, sometimes they'll even get to a part in the song where you might go, well, they should have done this change
yeah.
instead of this or
People like
whatever.
us are a lot of times overcritical.
Overcritical.
Yeah,
We don't listen to music the same way as we did
yeah,
when we were kids before we started
yeah,
playing. It's just part of it, and it's like being a magician. You just when you're if you know how the tricks are done,
yeah,
you experience it differently than somebody else who doesn't
absolutely.
know. So it's like, you know, but that is what, for me anyway, causes. I'm sure it's the same way for other people. Is what causes you to write songs to begin with. Is like you end up wanting to write what you're not hearing,
Absolutely. To
uh,
kind of break out of
and
that box. Yeah.
yeah, and come up with something that you like the sound of. Hopefully, it resonates with other people. That's great if it does. But as I said earlier too, it'd be something I'd be doing even if nobody heard it
Yeah.
because I like it. And plus, once you get it out of your head, you feel better.
Yes, absolutely.
One of those earworms that
Have you ever? I know you mentioned it a while ago. Just the other day, man, I was driving down the road, actually going to pick up that amplifier, listening to a bunch of music. I've got such a wide. I'm like you. I listen to about everything, but a certain. It just. I was hurting real bad that day. Of course, I've got a lot of physical issues, and I was hurting real bad that day, and something just popped in my head. Coming from that gospel background, I was kind of structured the country and the gospel the way the song's written, and something popped in my head just called "Can He Take the Pain Away?"
mm-hmm.
And it literally, with that, 36 hours later, in about 16 pages, because I don't type as much. I do for some reason. I like having a notebook. I got a notebook here. It gets in my head and I have to get it out. And I love that you said that. It's like when you get this in your head, it's like it might be 3 o'clock in the morning. You might be taking a shower. You might be,
Right.
but it just eats at you until you get it done with. But I'm having so much trouble with this because the way I structure a song, I just write down all my phrases, my
That's it.
keys, and then I start organizing and seeing what direction. It's kind of like I tell people with me making my knives, being a blacksmith, it just depends on how it forges out. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm literally going to have to bring in help to finish this because I have so much that I want to say. I don't know how to say it. And I played it for my buddy Dan. He'll be on a show in the future, but he's played with some fairly big name. Let's just say he's been in the room with Bon Jovi more than once. But
Nice.
he's out of California. But I'm gonna have him come in and help me. And when I played it, he goes, "Dude, you can't finish this song." And I said, "Why?" He says, "You're too close to it." And I never thought about that.
Yeah.
And it's like what brought it up is you talking about waking up to it. So I'm going to have to turn it over to him and let him, because I am too close to it. And some songs, like I've written songs, I don't know if you have, that are too close to me that I just I can't get them out of there. I love how you say, if nobody listens to them, it don't bother me. I'm still going to do it.
Right.
But there's guys out here. I got a friend in Nashville that writes songs professionally. He can write 3 or 4 songs a week, and he's got some platinums. He's got some big name number 1s out there, and I'm gonna get him on the show. He's actually.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
I asked him, "How do you do it?" And he goes, "Man, it just comes naturally." I'm like, "Dude, I can't do that. How can you put out something that much?" And because every time I write a song, it's part of me. He goes, "It used to be that way. Now it's just lyrics." And
Yep.
I said, "Did you lose your drive and disassociate for it?" He goes, "No, I've got it even more now, but I've learned it's just a song." And I said, "It can't be that way. It's every song is special, you know."
It's your baby, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think part of what you get good at over time, and I think it's something you have to consciously work on, especially in like his case, is learning to separate that, but still keeping the fire. You know what I mean, for it.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy thing to do.
yeah,
And it's something that we probably, and he probably, if you ask him, he says he might say that he probably still has to make a conscious effort to sort of do that. But it's and that's where I think that's where part of like where some of the term formula came from. Obviously, there's song structures and all that,
Yeah.
but the other part of it is being able to put, so like if you can teach music, which I did for a long time, you know, I taught music. Obviously, you have to be able to sort of break it down for somebody before you can teach it. You know?
yeah. There is a theory behind it. I mean,
Yeah. So if you can break it down, then that also means that you sort of, you know, you understand the mechanics behind it and what you're going to need, what note choices and stuff like that work, and what creates a certain mood, whatever mood you're trying to create when you're writing something. You know, and once you sort of start thinking about it that way, like in terms of I hate to use this word, really hate to use it, but I'm going to use it, like almost like academically, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. You're
or
right.
formulaic or whatever.
Yeah.
That's where you start to get sort of maybe a little bit of separation from it, because the people, and the people that still have we forget what it's like to listen to music the same way we did when we were kids. I think, you know, because it just to still have that wide-eyed wonder about it.
Yeah.
You know, I can't remember what that's like. You know what I mean? So when I listen to music now, I can't help but analyze it a little bit, and the reason is because you're
It's what you do.
yeah, you just your mind gets sort of programmed that way.
Yeah.
And it's on purpose, because you got to learn the craft to be able to do it.
Absolutely. And then you've got people like Mr. Victor Wooten, that one of the best bass players on the planet, that teaches theory.
Yeah.
And he has excelled past us to the point that he's like Obi-Wan Kenobi, that he is so into the love of the music that he just shakes his fingers and magical things happen, you know. But he said something along the lines of what you was just saying. He goes, "I learned over time that all the fanciness, you don't see them in number 1 hits." I went to one of his clinics. He said, the simple stuff is what gets people's attention. He goes, as musicians, and writers, we want to really showcase what we know. But and it's so cool how you said about that wide-eyed, you know, that energy that until you get to a certain level, like Inagata Davida, it was not one of their biggest songs. It was too long, too drawn out, and it's the simple stuff until you get to a certain level. But once again, like you were saying about different. The only way I know how to put it is different strokes for different folks. You know,
Yeah.
it comes down to it where me and you we sit and analyze the. I gave up playing music by sheet music when I found out that I could play it easier. I'm like you. Was a lazy guitarist and a lazy bass player. I could play it by ear and get by. My wife is very big into music, and she's like, "Oh, check out this note, check out this formula." And I'll be in here playing it, and she'll playing something. She goes, "You're not doing it right." She'll pull up the music, and it's like, I'm like, "Babe, go away." You know? But it's one of them deals. The beautiful part of music is it works for everybody,
Yeah.
no matter what level you're at. From the 6-year-old kid in middle school band, or the 8-year-old, 10-year-old playing the little kazoos and the, what do they call them things? My wife's got one in there, the wannabe flutes.
Like a recorder, yeah.
Recorder, that's it.
Yeah.
And then when they get into the, we got to start somewhere. And then they take it all the way to become somebody like Mozart. Mozart was one of the greatest composers. But I can only listen to one or two of his songs, and then it's just so in depth. It's just like,
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go listen to Metallica now.
Right.
But
Well, like you said, different strokes for different folks, man. Because it's all relevant, and it's all, you know, you look. Like I said earlier, I can go back and listen and appreciate the country players now, because they were all amazing. They could all play, they could all sing. But when I was younger, like I said, it didn't have the drama and the drive for me,
Yeah.
and the teeth and stuff like that. And I was missing that about music. I didn't even know that these other bands existed when I was a kid, because my dad would only listen to country, and so they're
yeah,
so basically I only listen to country is what that means. But when I was able to discover other things, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what I've been missing. And you realize that that's probably the one, maybe the one place in your life that you do want drama is in your art.
absolutely.
You know what I mean? That's really what hooked me about it. And when you get to be a musician, there's always something to love about it, no matter how much you get to the point to where you analyze it. And now we're at the point to where, like, even if you don't know a song, like you hear an open string on a guitar, it's an A or
Yeah.
something, or
Yeah.
you can identify a G chord. So, okay, I already know what key it's in. If it's a G major chord, you know what I mean? If there's going to be a minor change, it's probably going to be the minor 6, E minor, or what. You can hear that stuff coming, so it's like it becomes even predictable to
Absolutely.
to a point.
Because it is structured.
It is structured, but you still find other things to love and appreciate it, because music is so vast
Absolutely.
that it really never ends. And the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's never not something to explore or learn.
Absolutely.
And so for me, it's never been hard to keep my fire with it, just because it's like you said, it's even when I'm sitting down watching TV, I've got a guitar,
and
I
just something you're
almost
thinking
can't hear
about.
without one.
Yeah. If you don't
Yeah,
have a
so-
guitar, you're humming something in your head or something.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to hear one of the stupidest things that people laugh about me about?
What's that?
Being raised up playing in the country genre and stuff like that. All these older musicians always been able to be playing, and even like B.B. King, be playing and be like, "Oh, wait a minute, tang tang tang," while they're playing, And I've always put that as, you're a good guitarist when you can hear it out of tune without having to use a tuner or a piano. And it's so funny, because I tell my wife that all the time. We joke around about her being around my family, because my dad used to, and that's a quirk for me, being a studio being in the studio like I am. When I hit the off the record button, tune your damn guitar. I'm sorry, I'm that way. And the other day, I had told my wife and my dad had told my wife over the years that was always the thing, little stupid thing for me, is that when you can tune a guitar without a tuner and a piano just by memory and hearing it.
Yeah.
The other day I was sitting and hearing my wife come in, and I was just, tuning up at my lap steel here. I was tuning it to an open G. And she goes, "Where's your tuner?" I was like, "I ain't got it on." Never realized it. And she just cackled. You've met Crystal. You know how she is. She just cackled and walked out of the room. She goes, Are you getting good or are you getting good? I said, I don't know, but I'm sure happy. That was always a
Yeah.
goal for me. But now, in saying what you was just saying about the vastness and the versatility, being a guitar player like me and you have for years, and having our idols and stuff. Have you noticed? I don't know if you're into the community as much, like on YouTube and stuff, as I am online. Have you noticed the amount of minor ninths and freaking crazy scales of these young people coming out, and the style of music? It seems like for us, for the guitarist, they're going more elaborate. There's this little band called Polyphoria or
Yeah,
Polyphoria.
yeah.
The lead guitarist's name's Tim. Some of the
Yeah.
stuff they're doing with like finger hammer strokes, it's like they have taken everything that we was raised up with and thrown it in a bag, mixed this thing up, and then threw in a whole bunch of Mozart on top of it. And look
Yeah.
at it. I've been playing guitar, well, I mean, literally since I was, like you, 10 years old. And I'm looking at these young kids going, where did you get it? Where are they coming up with some of this stuff?
Yeah, man, it's such a vast world, and we would have never known about it without technology, without
Absolutely.
YouTube. And
Very good lead off. Keep going with it, brother.
yeah. And so technology is a blessing for us musicians nowadays, because again, it's way different than recording on a little 4-track recorder on a
Yeah.
cassette tape and then hoping that it came out sounding like something.
Yeah.
But so now you can do everything right in your home. You don't have to pay for
Yeah.
studio time, nothing like that. And you can put it out there for the world to hear, and,
And I'm
it's
loving
awesome.
it.
There's all kinds of groups out there. Like if you wanted to download, I think I can't remember what Tommy Lee's band name was several years ago. That it was Outside Crew, obviously, but I probably got this all wrong. But I think they were, instead of hiring a guitar player to play some of these tracks and maybe paying big money for
He
like
would bring
whatever,
people. Yeah, no
Pete
names.
Warren.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were putting the stems out there. You could download the stems, play on it, put it
Yeah.
back up there. And
Yeah.
if they liked the guitar solo that you added, they
Yeah.
keep it. And you got, so the possibilities are endless nowadays, and I love that. I love
Yes.
that aspect of it. The younger cats coming up, and there's like I said earlier, there's so many incredible players out there.
Incredible players.
I don't even try to keep up with that
No.
anymore. That's not what drives me more. My thing now is, because I started looking at it and I was going, okay, so we've always had innovation. Obviously Eddie Van Halen,
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix, all
Started
those guys.
that. Yeah. Pioneer.
Yeah, all those influences that we grew up on, and those guys are still listening to. We're always gonna build on that stuff, and it depends on what aspect you take away from it as to what depends on your goal is really
Yeah.
what it is. So the new kids are sort of creating all this really cool and really new content. And guys the guitar itself is such a vast instrument. It's one of the things that makes the instrument hard
One
to
of the most
learn.
expressionate on the planet.
Yeah, it's just as much a percussive instrument as it is a string instrument.
Uh-huh.
And so they're taking to that stuff, and they're creating all this cool new material with it. And so I look at that and I go, that's almost a whole nother, almost relearning the instrument
It
again.
is.
And for me, I tend to like sort of, so like you can pull up these amazing arrangements. I think there was a guy that was doing like Jump, Van Halen, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it was all, I can't remember his name, but he was an amazing player. It was an amazing arrangement, and it's super cool. And I think he was one of the guys that did more of almost like a chord melody version of it, which is would
Yeah.
be more my speed. I'm not so much all the percussive stuff
Arpeggio.
on
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Arpeggio percussions. Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff is I think it's cool to listen to, but at the same time I go back and I think, would I want to listen to a whole album like that? And
Good
for
point.
me,
Good
the
point.
answer is
No.
I wouldn't. I'd want to hear, and maybe this is my age, I don't know, but I'd want to hear more traditional playing.
Absolutely.
Like I'd listen to a whole album of somebody doing really cool chord melody stuff.
Yes.
that's more where I'm coming from. But to me, that's more arranging and well, I can't say that. Uh, let me just say this, because that's a whole different world to get into, and it's super vast,
Yeah.
and it would be hard for me to sort of almost rewire my brain.
To do
That's
it.
where I started concentrating on songwriting
Yeah.
and singing. Because for me, I was like, well, I would rather be able to sit down with my guitar
Absolutely.
and sing a song for somebody, and that there you got your harmony, your rhythm, and your melody. And I would rather be able to sort of create something that way, because I identify more with it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I would rather put it in an album and listen to somebody do a whole album of just acoustic guitar and vocals rather than an instrumental thing
Absolutely.
where somebody's
Absolutely.
doing more percussive stuff. Even though it's an amazing use of the guitar, and those guys are super skilled.
Yeah.
For me, my ear wants to go to just more of like a
The
straight
old school
song,
traditional.
pop. Yeah,
Three quick things. That's the beauty of the versatility and expression of music now. But
yep,
second thing, I think a lot of this influence on these new musicians coming out, you said it, is technology. They can
yeah,
YouTube anything, and they're not stuck into a certain style where we was raised up, we was directly influenced by the people around us because we didn't
right,
have internet. So it
right,
took me years to break away from the country and the gospel spectrum, and you was more into a pop and rock area
right.
where you're at. Now they have all of this technology and all this information, and they soak this in watching these YouTube videos, and they hear this sound and they hear this sound. And I see a lot of folk influences from foreign countries coming in. One of my favorite bands is The Who, where they've taken traditional Mongolian music and mixed it with rock. I think that's where a lot of this comes. And then once again, the technology that you're saying, even with doing the percussion instrument and stuff like that, people, Eddie was doing it. Even I remember
Yeah.
back in the day when Eddie was doing his hammers. Everybody's like, "What's he doing? What? That ain't right. That ain't right." Blah 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 blah. Now that's a big thing. That's the beauty of music. That's
Well,
the
and again, Ed said himself, obviously he didn't invent that stuff. There were
no.
people doing two-handed stuff on the guitar
Yeah.
before that. But he sort of, brought it to the forefront. But also that wasn't the coolest thing about Ed.
No.
The coolest thing about Ed was his musicality overall, not necessarily the tap and stuff. And I'm sure those, the younger, you still see it obviously because the younger kids are like taking a page from that,
Yeah.
And then go and boosting it sort of to into new heights,
It's
But
just crazy. It's like some of
yeah,
this stuff.
the other, yeah, but the other part of that for me is that it with technology you also get into a lot of editing, quantizing, stuff like that,
Yeah. See, now
and
we're going. Good
I
lead
miss
off.
the
Keep going.
organicness of
Yeah.
even real vocal tracks.
Yeah.
Steve Vai played with Portia. He did a song with him. I remember like reading where he was when he heard the end product. He was he realized that how much they had sort of edited and chopped up what he did
Yes.
in the studio for them. And at first he was a little weird, as he put it. And this is funny. He goes. I'm used to just laying down a guitar track and having people like accept that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean. And he was real complimentary because he loved the tune and he
Yeah.
loved those guys and he sat them on stage with them and there was no animosity whatsoever with it because
But
and the track's really cool.
there there is something in saying that. Just like with the YouTube thing. It's real easy, and I'm not knocking the musicians of any of these, but
Yeah,
it's real easy to sit here at my house with a camera and a guitar and to retrack,
yeah,
keep playing
that's it.
until
Yeah,
I get it right. You
yeah,
put half of these guys, now there's a bunch of them out here that can,
yeah.
but you put a half of these young kids up on stage with another band. I remember the days of being able to get called up on a stage and playing with another band and put out something presentable.
Mhm.
And you still see it some, but you don't see it as much as you used to. To me,
Right.
just like you're saying, I love that organicness. Me being the technical, Crystal calls me a technical freakzilla because I'm a mechanic also. I'm real big into the technical aspects and the clipping and the stuff like this. And you said something about Eddie Van Halen. The biggest thing for Eddie Van Halen was the stuff he was doing with his amplifiers, putting the rectifier in behind it and cranking the amp wide open and cranking the voltage down to get that certain growl. But once again, he did what the best he could. Steve Vai, another pioneer, Joe Satriani, love the guys because of what. It's so funny because even Steve Vai now, he had all the axe, the big thing into all the axe processors, axe effects and stuff like it. Now he's coming back down to the simplicity of things, and we'll get into that in a little bit in the equipment. But I love the organicness about. That's the reason when I was saying about writing, I just grab my acoustic because I think a lot of the times you can over technical.
Yeah, I don't want to forget about the song is the thing.
Absolutely.
Because some of the newer music coming out, like the gent stuff and the super technical guitar stuff. Like when here's the thing. When I was growing up listening to the Guitar Heroes, Yngwie, Steve Vai, Paul Gilbert, all those guys, Vinnie Moore, Tony McAlpine.
You mentioned one Paul Gilbert. I love the guy.
Well, the thing that made the heroes, which you don't get even these days, you don't get as much, is they not only did they have amazing technical ability, which a lot of YouTube players do these days, but you also have to remember, like you just said, they're sitting down with in perfect like classical playing position. You know what I mean? They can do. You don't know how many takes they've done to get it right. You don't know if there's any editing that's done. You don't know if they've quantized it after they've played it like that.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff sounds like superhuman the way they play it. The old guys, Paul Gilbert and all those guys, especially Paul, man, that dude, technical ability still to this day is like
Paul Gilbert.
The slide, yeah. That's a good
example.
That's a good example because that's how he's differentiating himself these days. Because he's looking at it going, okay, there's all these amazing technical players out there, and even though he can do that stuff still and sound
great,
unbelievable, he's got the most ferocious right, still the best pick. His right hand is just
and that 7-fret spread.
Yeah, I mean,
how does he do that?
Well, he's got monster hands and a pinky that has its own brain. You know what I mean? So it's like he can do those triad stretches and he can still do it. That 3-octave triad thing that he does.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The 7-fret. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he can still do all that stuff, but he's looking at it now, going, okay, well, how do I still sort of stand out or whatever?
How do I still be relevant? Or it ain't relevant. It's
yeah. Well, and he's really musical with it. For one thing, now he's gotten that slide down to the point to where he even grabs it before
quick draw with the magnets. It never misses a God Almighty. See, that's a whole other.
Yeah, but you got to remember too, he's playing all those slide parts on a guitar that's not set up for slide
with a low action.
Slide back down and then shred on it.
Yeah.
So you know his action's low.
Yeah.
But he'll grab the slide, and he's got that whole album where he's doing the Dio stuff.
Yeah. Oh, where he redid. Oh my God.
Yeah. And he's copping the vocal line like he's like the best slide player.
I never knew he could sing like that until here lately. I'm like,
well, I mean, he's always been able to sing, but he's dropped kind of sort of the trying to sing in the studio and stuff like that. Well, he's a great live singer too.
Yeah.
Like Mr. Big had like just killer harmonies and all that stuff. But he's playing all those vocal lines on guitar now with the slide, and he's just spot on with it. And back to the what separated sort of the Guitar Heroes then is they all had style, and they were all creative. Like, I don't care who you are, like Yngwie's vibrato is instantly recognizable, and his note choice and everything, his tone is,
I always wondered if it comes from that scallop guitar neck.
Yeah, some of it does, but I for me, it's those guys grew up on. All I got available to me is a Marshall Plexi that really doesn't have a preamp to speak of. Yeah. So if it's going to sound a certain way, it's up to me to make that sound.
Absolutely. So they're forced to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, they grew up basically. So I don't care how good of a YouTube player you are or whatever. It's like, unless you can stand on stage.
Yeah.
Swing your guitar around your neck, catch it, finish the lick you were on, grab a pick, kick it, and like Ingve was doing,
Yeah.
and still say, and then tune your guitar in the middle of a song
Yep.
while you're doing all that,
Detune
and
two
like
layers down and then two tones back up and then you're right back at it. Yeah, it's
yeah, and Ed, Ed keeping his Strat in tune, Steve Ray Vaughan
yeah.
continuing to play while his guitar
Not
tech's
changing
changing his strings
guitars out
for him.
6 times during the set. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like all that stuff is that's live playing experience, and that's
Yes.
back to being the difference between a studio musician
Musician
maybe
and
and a live player.
absolutely.
And like you said, there are plenty of players out there that can do both,
Yeah.
but that's the only experience you get doing
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just
That's
being out
that's
there.
another thing too, man. COVID about killed me because I'm a concert junkie.
Right.
I love going live. I love listening to it. I'm going to one of the most beautiful. I've been waiting for them for years. I'm going next month. Mastodon and Gajora are going to be in
Yeah, yeah,
Oklahoma
yeah.
City, and I'm like, oh, finally. But I did want to touch back on something that we'll get into the next segment on this on the technical side of things. But you mentioned something with Paul. I'm really getting into slide guitar. Of course, playing with my hands messed up, I can still play. I can't do a lot, but I can do some slide. But I set up a Les Paul, my little, it was an Epiphone, but I set it up. I actually contacted Paul and found out how high he sets his fret up, and it is low. He sets it up
Yeah.
in 3000s.
Yep.
And what people don't understand is how light of a touch he has to have with that slide and playing all that shredding guitar and then sliding into that slide. It literally, to me, the only way I can compare it to is a quintathlon in the Olympics where they're
Yep.
skiing for 5 kilometers and then they have to shoot that little 22 and they have to that's the extreme difference, that he's
Right.
I just you mentioned Paul Gilbert. He's one of my. I just came across him. I'd always heard of Mr. Big and all that, and I knew who he was. But just here in the last 3 or 4 years, man, I've come across him, and it was like, why? And I'm not. This is personal opinion, folks. I'm gonna make some people mad. Why is he not as big as Slash? Why is he not as big as Stevie Ray Vaughan? Why is he not as big as B.B. King, Eric Clapton? Once again, it comes to perfect time for the perfect place. Because he's every bit as good.
Yeah,
And he's big, don't take me wrong, but
well, yeah, timing's everything, and placement and timing, that it really is everything. And then there's definitely a bias.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bias in everything you do
Yeah.
these days, and it doesn't matter what field you're talking about. But and Stevie Ray Vaughan took a lot of crap too, because he was like, it wasn't real blues,
Yeah.
like a lot of people. But people, even as musicians, it's funny, have a hard time sometimes just using their ear.
yeah.
And like it goes back to something I always read that Eddie Van Halen used to say: if it sounds good, it is good.
Absolutely.
And you listen to Steve Ray Vaughan, and especially like his live performances, and you could roll tape on it and cut it and sell it as an album. They were so good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And he was every bit a good a singer as he was a guitar player.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
You can even see it in his mic technique, the way he worked the mic and all that stuff. But
Did you ever see how he used to do that? That when he'd play and he'd slide over like this and kind of sing out of the corner of his mouth.
yeah,
I finally figured out why he was doing it. I do it with the guitar amps. I'll roll the microphone to the side because it changes the tonal quality coming. I never knew that until I got to recording, But
Yep.
I thought he was looking at his guitar, but he'd be talking like this, and then he'll come over here and it changes the tone. And it's little stuff like you're saying, you notice that, and I notice that. People's like, huh? I guarantee there's going to be people listening to this show that's going to go, nah, no way, and they'll find a live video and see him do it.
yeah. He was working the mic all the time, working the guitar all the time, and but there's always going to be that bias where it's like if you're playing like blues,
Yeah.
that has a certain pull and a certain audience, you know what I mean? But if you're doing anything like what Mr. Big did, even though they had like To Be With You, that that's going to be considered in a lot of circles like kind of useless pop stuff or
Yeah.
something that you
Yeah.
might want to look past. Even though it's a good tune and it's well written,
Yeah.
and especially the verse, it's great. You know what I mean? But it's not gonna have the same pull as like a like something like a blues thing like BB King or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. You know that's
Or even something like a Guns N' Roses tune at the time or something. Yeah.
yeah. So again, what you're doing and the timing of what you're doing is so important.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I'll go so far as to say it's like one of the only things because you don't even have to be the most talented person in
Nope.
the room. Obviously, you just
They just need to
or at
like
least
it.
the most skilled musician. Let's say,
Yeah.
you know,
They just,
maybe
somebody needs to like it with the right ears and the right power.
right.
It's almost a
Yeah,
sociological and a status thing almost.
yeah,
That's the reason I don't like big recording big recording production companies
yeah.
because of the simple fact that they want to push a certain thing, and you said a really good point I wanted to bring up about timing. I'm seeing a rejuvenation, a lot of that older stuff that we was raised up with. This younger generation's coming out, oh my God, have you heard this? Yeah, I've been listening to it since I was your age.
Right.
We've been telling you this for years, but you haven't
Yeah.
been listening because now with the technology thing. But I'm seeing a lot of the older stuff, coming back. People, it's like getting a rejuvenation of it. It's cool. But would it be fair to say that a lot of the stuff, and I'm glad you brought that in, because that goes into our next point about if you're going to try to make it in this business and the timing and everything. Do you think that it could be more a sociological thing? I mean, look at Nirvana. I'm going to make a lot of people mad. I like Nirvana,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of bands out there that's a lot better.
Yeah,
But they had the right sound at the right time. That society it latched on. And is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. I mean there's a bunch of factors there, but yeah, that's exactly right. I mean they had a certain sound and it hit the spot at the
Yeah.
time, and that's it. And like you said, I like Nirvana too. There are definitely things to appreciate about them.
Oh yeah.
For one thing, their organicness and their rawness, which is one of the things that I'm missing
Big
today.
into it,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? About a lot of things. Uh, so, and there's for me, I've the stuff I love the most is when those two worlds collide. And you have the organicness,
Yes.
and then good songwriting and all that stuff.
Yes, and then the
And-
technological side of it, technical side
The
of it.
technological side and the ability to still play and do some cool stuff. And it doesn't always have to be super obvious in a song. It can be something that as simple as like like a couple well orchestrated like counterpoint sort of timing guitar. Like if you're in a band with like two guitar players,
Yep.
let's say.
Alternate timing on the guitars, stroke.
Yeah, not playing the same thing, but
Yes.
two guitars. And if you're working with a couple of tight players, that timing and that balance, that counterbalance, can come off and sound really cool, really
Oh, yeah.
cool, and really musical. And it's if you appreciate what you're listening to, it's like that's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, technically that's really good. Like if you can play, if you're a tight enough player to where you can play like just right on, real
Yeah.
tight, and other things like if you're playing to a click track and you're able to like pull back a little bit or swing it or something like that, all that stuff is a demonstration of good musicianship.
Absolutely.
But it's not shredding. You know what I mean?
No, but it's just as important.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a way, and that's my favorite stuff. To when you got the songwriting, you got the organicness, and then you've got stuff in there that lets you know that man, these guys can play.
Yeah.
And they know what they're doing, and it's the stuff I gravitate towards anyway.
It's funny you say that when you was talking about being, just like a half step off or something. I've wondered, even in my own life, how many times I hear a certain sound because I made a mistake and it sounded good. I wonder
Right.
how many bands that's happened. Epic guitar riffs or something. They end up trying to do something else and they make a mistake and it works right. But it was funny, even on the technology thing. One of my favorite bands is Gajora, and I play a lot of their stuff. But they have a certain sound that I've been trying to reproduce for about 10 years, even not playing, but even in the recording side of it. And I was able, once again with technology, to watch them live. Yep. And I watched them live at Red Rock, and the lead singer playing the Charvel guitar, he plunges it straight into Orange amp. Well, now it's a Friedman, but he had a certain pedal, and I thought it was a wah pedal, but it wasn't going the right direction. I kept looking, and it was bright red, and I'm like, so I screenshotted it, blew it up, and I found it. It's a Digitech whammy pedal, and
yep.
And that certain it's just iconic. I picked this thing up last week, and for 10 years I've been trying to get that song with my hands, with guitar, with a wah pedal, but a wah pedal just doesn't go at 2 full octaves. Yep. And once I found that out, of course with internet I was able to find out what that pedal was. Now I was doing it yesterday, and my wife come in here, she goes, "You're happy, aren't you?" I was like, "Oh," because I called her, "Check it out, I can do it." Right. That to me is what's so cool. Is like you was talking about with that organicness and that rawness, and to be able, the technology has made music easier, but I also think that it has taken it to another level.
For sure,
to stand out now, you have to have all of it together. You have to have the organicness. You have to have the goods to make it big. Unless you're blonde-haired with big boobs in the country world or the pop world, and everybody sounds the same, and they all write in the same way, and they're taking it. But sorry, I had to say that. But if you don't have that, you're going to have that rawness, that the good lyrics, the technical just spot on. And then you're going to have to find something that catches people's attention.
Right.
And that's where we're at now. There's so many good musicians out here that, like I said, I have no aspirations of making it big. I laugh. I hate to be that way, but I don't know how many working in studios and being a musician like you have, we've heard people, "Oh, we're going to make it big. We're going to make it big." Well, keep thinking that way, because that's the only way you're going to make it big is if you keep thinking that way. But don't let it break your life.
Right.
If you don't. I've seen a lot of musicians that just tear them down.
Mm-hmm.
And with you, it sure hadn't. I love how you say, and Crystal even laughs at it, I don't, when I play now, it's funny, I'll get up on the stage with my guys, and then I'm up there, I'm just enjoying it. I don't care if anybody's listening or not. I'm listening. That's all that matters to me.
Right.
But I'm enjoying it. In the same way with you, you're doing it for the love of the music.
Yeah.
Guys, Paul Gilbert, man, I watched a video of him the other day. He was doing a clinic, just him by himself with some backing tracks, and just shredding it, man, and just enjoying it. That is where I want to stay. Yeah. Even in the studio, I want to be, let's get in here and get this thing right. Let's not break a friendship because you're not playing it right. I don't want it played that way. I told Crystal, I said, of course, me being retired now too, the moment that it's not fun for me no more, I'm not doing it.
That's it. That if it ever gets just not fun, mind numbing, however you want to put it, that's when I'll sort of, retire. But the one thing I'll probably never not do is I'll always write stuff and record it. Even if I don't, even if I stop playing out, there's a lot of aspects about playing out that's a pain. It's a lot of work and things like that. But it's also, and this could be a gear discussion. It's also why I've gravitated towards slimming down what I bring out.
Perfect.
Yeah. Right.
Hold that thought. Let's take a break, and I want to come right into how you gig, what you travel with. That literally was the next thing on the list.
Okay.
You want to take a quick break right quick?